Turns out, like in life, every baseball team has something they regret and they wish they could take back. We're going to talk about those regrets today, and could the Guardians make a trade for the hottest hitter in the playoffs?
You are Locked On Guardians, your daily podcast on the Cleveland Guardians, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the show. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. You're saying the Guardians are going to, are going to trade for Mookie Betts? That was the hottest guy in the postseason, right? That was the guy who.
Sure, if the postseason started in April, went to September, and just excluded everything in October.
Great. Old friend Christian Walker,
Yes.
Evan Longoria.
Yeah, hopefully the Guardians can swing trades for all of them because they definitely need a third baseman who's 40.
Yeah, always. When is that not the answer? I don't know what the question is, but when is that? So the Rangers have advanced, and we currently have Arizona beating Philadelphia as we are recording in Game 7. I know we're going to talk Adolis Garcia. I do find it funny, and it's just a matter of performance. Like, leading up to the postseason, Christian Walker is definitely the more famous, more famous than Adolis Garcia, but they're the same story. Should we, do we want to start there with this idea of people jumping all over St. Louis for how can you let Adolis Garcia go?
I mean, every team's got these guys. Obviously, we see the most griping about it in Cleveland because that's who we follow and who we talk about and the people we interact with. Like, obviously people are gonna have their gripes about, and I'm not saying those gripes aren't legitimate either. Like, I think I had something I posted on Twitter earlier. People, I don't know, got wound up about for one reason or another, thinking I was saying it wasn't valid or,
because I'll say it's not valid. And I'll take that point. And the reason I would say it's not valid is because literally this happens everywhere. Houston Astros, Mauricio Dubon is up for a Gold Glove. Guess what? He was cut by multiple organizations.
A sham Gold Glove nomination. I think we both agreed on.
Yeah, I know, but he's still up for one. I mentioned Christian Walker, a guy who should win the Gold Glove, on top of being one of our number one targets, let go by multiple organizations. Like,
I mean,
this is what happens in baseball. Is it ideal? No, but like, to act like this doesn't ever happen is just a falsehood. And it's one of those things that, like, that just happens when you are playing baseball. Some guys need a change of scenery. Some guys, perform a bit better once they get some opportunities. Adolis Garcia is a really weird situation because he was playing in Japan and then he came over at like 24. Like, he did not take a normal route. This was a Cuba to Japan, 24 years in the minors, and he had performed okay, but it was, of all situations, this is quite possibly the weirdest one for anyone. They're really, because of the fact it's Cuba to Japan to AAA baseball, there is no one who compares to this situation. His, in a way, stands out as the most unique, but there are literally players who every team have cut they regret.
Yeah, all 30 Major League Baseball teams have this story. Like, you can look at almost every roster and say that everybody has missed on a player or has. Every
roster's got one of these guys. JD Martinez, this is one. Like I said, another one that comes to mind. I mean, Adam Duvall was a guy who was, like I said, I can just keep going. Like, This is baseball.
But I don't think it's not valid. See, I think there is a lot of context to this stuff. Like, it's fine, and this should be valid. It should be valid to fans because, one, fandom's not rational. You can't sit there and expect everybody in your fan base to sit there and rationalize why this guy didn't work here and why you decided that he wasn't worth developing or trading in this trade, whatever. I don't think that's fair to a fan base because sometimes you do let more good guys go than you should. The big thing here is that I pointed on Twitter. It's process over results. No human being, whether it's baseball or anything in life, is going to make the right decision 100% of the time. So naturally, every baseball team, every team, NFL, NBA, whatever it is going to make a decision is going to come back to burn them. And it's really about the process that leads to the decision. This is where, again, especially when you're talking about minor leaguers like Adolis Garcia or Nolan Jones or Will Benson or Yandy Diaz, like this is where your process, your GM, your staff, analytics, all of this comes to a head when you make these decisions. And you're talking about indicators from the minors, your scouting reports, what data translates, how you feel about the data, how do you feel about the player? And also there's opportunity costs too. Like, you know, the Yandy Diaz trade, for example. Yeah, it definitely burned Cleveland. He's been good with Tampa Bay, and I think a lot of people felt like he would have been a good fit here, or he should have been given more play here. The trade did net back Carlos Santana, who went to the All-Star game in 2019. Now, of course, it's 1 year, and Cleveland didn't do very well. It didn't go to the playoffs in 2019, so it's kind of a moot point. But there's always opportunity costs, like the Nolan Jones thing. We'll see what happens there next year. I don't want to get into every single player because we could literally do a show on this the entire offseason, but it's not the process that gets you there. Like the Junior Caminero thing we talked about. It may have not just been baseball specific on Junior Caminero. Like there may have been other factors at play there. And yes, it was a bad decision and a bad read by the front office to find Tobias Myers.
But it also might not be. Like there's also a world where Junior Caminero is the next Andy Marte, and it ends up being much ado about nothing. It's not likely, but that stuff still happens. Like
it does. But my point here is you've got to have the right process to avoid. That's why you have processes. That's why you have data to rely on and scouts and things like that. Because if you make too many, like the Cardinals, for example, the Cardinals are still a good franchise. Like I know they had a very bad year this year. Obviously, they've made some bad decisions. Overall, they are a successful year in and year out, and some of it, you know, maybe it's in spite of some of these decisions, but generally, like we said, everybody's going to have these decisions in baseball. It's when you have too many that you need to reevaluate. And I think teams are always doing this. I think in this day and age with GMs and the way GMs speak, you can tell they're always looking at their process and they're always trying to say, okay, why did we make the decision? Why did this player not develop here? Why do we move on from this player? And why did we, you know, what happened to lead to this decision? And if you have a good process in place, you're going to make the right decision more often than not. That's why people say process over results. It's important to have the right process in place to make the right decisions, and the results will follow. They're not going to follow 100% of the time though. The best processes is things are still going to get through, and you're still going to have things that come back to burn you. And it's okay to lament those things, but it's also important to acknowledge context. Like everyone's going to focus on all the stuff that Cleveland has done. Like the Jesus Aguilar thing to me is ridiculous because it's not as if he went on to become a Hall of Fame level player, or even he made one All-Star team. He was barely in the majors this year. He had 1.5 good seasons.
Yeah, he had basically 2 good halves. And
if you kept him in 2017, that also means you're not having Edwin Encarnacion. And you might say, well, they didn't need Edwin Encarnacion because they had Jesus Aguilar. He had 1 season in 2018 that Edwin did. Edwin had 5. I'm looking at stats right now, but Edwin had 5, 6, 7 good seasons, better than Jesus Aguilar's best season. So yeah, Jesus Aguilar's peak year in 2018, he never was better than that. Edwin had multiple years better than that, and they weren't all with Cleveland. But you know, if you keep Jesus Aguilar, you probably don't end up with Edwin. And I'm taking Edwin over Jesus Aguilar.
I would rather have neither at his cost. Honestly, I think that would have been the correct approach.
I thought the Edwin thing worked out as well as it should have, and I always thought it was you were buying 2 good years to get. You were buying 3 years to get 2, and they did get 2 from him before they moved on. But the whole point is everybody's got these things.
Yeah.
Like the Gio Urshela thing is very similar to Adolis Garcia because not in terms of the journey, but you know,
multiple times cut.
Cleveland played Urshela plenty. Okay, Urshela had over 5. I know it wasn't in 1 year, but the guy had over 500 at bats here. He went to Toronto, failed in Toronto. His first trip to New York, he didn't even bring him to the majors. They left him in the minors. They They designate him for assignment. And then, something clicked there. They figured it out in New York. And he hasn't been quite as good. I mean, last year he was fine. He was solid. He's never repeat that first year in New York. He probably never will at this point. But it doesn't mean he's not a solid player. But he had multiple chances in Cleveland. He had He had some chances in Toronto. And New York had to DFA him once before bringing him back. Like, these things happen. And again, you want to evaluate your processes. You want to make sure you have the right people in place to take advantage of these players' best skills and figure out how to get them there. But when you make these bad decisions, you've got to make better decisions.
And one final note, and we fixate because of what's happened recently. Like, I've been covering this team for so long. Like, you can go back to 2007 was when I first started covering. So that's 15 years now. So you go back 15 years, they weren't necessarily trading away guys who got good elsewhere, but it was losing guys in the Rule 5 draft. And then people fixated on the Rule 5 every year and why do good players keep leaving there. We're fixated this because of the years Benson and Jones had. If Benson and Jones regress, which you and I think they're going to, this may not even stand out as much in a year. And when you put together a list, right now, Benson, Jones, and Diaz are really the only guys I would say you have a strong case for. We spent an entire offseason talking about how Eric Haas was maybe the number 2 guy who got away, and then he was free to get home.
Years.
You know, he was solid, but it was never like he was spectacular. So they're doing better than most. It's just recency bias. But we are going to talk about Garcia and the Rangers, and could Cleveland and Texas make a match?
Stay tuned.
So our first friend of the day is our good friends over at Jase Medical. I have my Jase case right here that they sent along. Right now, Jase is, the nice thing about them is they're a company that is growing, improving, adding to their roster, as it were. They're always adding new medication in their offerings. They are, it's a way to take control of your own medical issues, concerns. In Jase case, what you get with the Jase case is 5 life-saving antibiotics for emergency use or non-emergency use. I've talked about my sinus infections, and the only way to treat a sinus infection is antibiotics. So it gives me the ability to not have to wait on a doctor to get that help when I need it. When it gets to the point that it gets so bad that I can't sleep at night, Jase can help me out. It was created by a doctor, and it is doctor recommended. So check out Jase for yourself. Go to jasemedical.com and enter the code LOCKEDON at checkout for a $20 discount on your order. That's promo code LOCKEDON at jasemedical.com.
World Series starts on Friday. Make sure wherever you are listening to the first pitch. Should be fun, no matter who it is. It looks like right now the game is close to the NLCS, but Rangers are fun. The Phillies are fun. The Diamondbacks are an interesting story. They're fun too. So whoever it is, it's going to be an interesting matchup. Make sure you are listening to World Series action on your Sirius XM app. Speaking of the Rangers, okay. If you had asked me coming out of the season, could Cleveland trade for Adolis Garcia?
Yeah.
Even halfway through the season, like, could you make a case for Cleveland being like a landing spot? Because Texas they're going to need pitching next year. They need pitching right now. And they have, I don't want to say a surplus of outfielders because, they have room to rotate some of these guys, but they do have, if they want to make a deal for a pitcher, trading an outfielder is certainly an avenue they could explore.
And even before adding Langford, I mean, the depth.
But
their depth of outfield is crazy throughout the minors. It might be the best outfield depth of any minor league organization.
It's pretty good. Even before this ALCS run he just went on, I think probably in the second half, I would have said, okay, they're not trading Adolis Garcia. Like, it's just not realistic. I would love to say, like, can Cleveland offer enough pitching and a package of players to get him? Because the science for Garcia would be, okay, he is 2 years away from free agency, and he's 30, and there were some indicators where you're like, okay, we don't know how sustainable this is going to be. There's good skills. But I think given what has happened over the last several months, not just this last week in the postseason, pretty clear they're not going to let him go. Like, all those indicators are no longer matter. Like, he's improved enough where they're going to hang on to him, and that is not going to be the guy you're going to target. But there are other pieces in this system that could make sense.
And, one of those things I just kind of want to state is something, I talked about off air, which is like, how did this happen? How did he get to where he is? And it's a degree of coaching. Like, he was a guy who was walking 6% of the time. So his first year, he was on fire. It was all bad pip luck, and he fell apart in the second half and was league average. Second year, he was just a tail above league average. So what's he do this year? Well, he increases his walk rate from 6 to 10%, almost doubles it. It's a significant increase. And he starts pulling the ball. He pulls the ball 10% more, stops hitting it, opposite field or center. And one of those things, the more time you spend researching this, it's like when you put the ball in the air, when you pull it, it is more than twice as likely to end up in a positive outcome than if you hit it to dead center or hit it the opposite way. So he changed his approach in terms of eye at the plate and patience, and in terms of his swing. And fantastic year. And like you said, he's there to stay, but that's hitting coaching, and that's a team giving and a player who's going to work on it, and it's everyone being all in, and the benefits are there.
And speaking of Adolis Garcia too, the Rangers also DFA'd him to add Mike Foltynewicz to their roster. Like, they could have easily lost him. All 29 teams had a chance to get him, and they didn't. The same way 29 teams had a chance to get Oscar Gonzalez, and they didn't, because guess what? They don't like him. No, that's unfair to Oscar, but he's a nice dude. But that's not really
I think our only issue with Oscar is the people who try to shove him down our throat. He's a nice dude. He's an interesting player. No, and he is not. And then the other thing I'll say with Oscar, though, is since there was no Rule 5 draft, I guess technically 29 teams didn't have an opportunity, right? Or was it the year before that he was also eligible?
Well, he became a minor league free agent first.
Well, it's like, did he ever really reach free agency, or did he just immediately sign the contract?
Well, he got a minor league deal to come back to Cleveland. You're telling me that 29 other teams, if one of the other 29 other teams said, hey, we'll actually sign you to a major league deal and put you on the 40-man roster. I'm staying in Cleveland? No. So nobody offered him. I'm sorry. And 100 times out of 100, you're taking the major league contract. Nobody offered it to him. Anyway, that's not the point here. Texas has a really good system. The guy, I don't know, like they're gonna have a really good outfield next year, because you have Evan Carter, you're gonna have Garcia, and they're gonna add Wyatt Langford. Like, you might want to say like the Adolis Tavares is an odd man out. I don't really know if I see a whole lot there worth trading for. Like, he had a good first half, but again, like,
he's Oscar Gonzalez, or not Oscar. He's Miles Straw with a chance at a better bat.
I mean, he had 14 home runs this year. Miles Straw, I don't think Miles Straw could hit 14 home runs on a high school field. No, I mean, against high school pitching maybe, but not on a high school field. So.
Yeah, but his overall, like, he still had an 80 runs created plus, because he doesn't get on base.
98. He had a 98 went WRC plus because he had power this year. I mean, he's a nice player, but I don't see enough there worth trading for. That's at this point in his career as a difference maker. Like, I know we've got a lot of people who are like, oh, Sal Frelick, we shouldn't get Sal Frelick. Sal Frelick has a chance to ascend more. I think Leody Tavares, like, he's only 25, so he started to show signs of improvement this year and kind of fell off. So maybe like Adolis Garcia, like last year, he showed signs of improvement and didn't totally go all the way through on the breakout until this year. So like maybe next year is the year where Tavares finally hits a breakout. Do we trust that in Cleveland that he's going to find the right coaching to do that? I don't know. Like,
no,
that's where good hitting coaches matter. And we're going to find out if Stephen Vogt, whoever the manager is, has to bring in his own guy, if it leaves in Chris Valaika. And I have a whole episode I want to do this offseason too on coaching and different things that go into that. And I don't necessarily know that I want to trade for a prospect either from Texas. Like, I know you want to bring up Dustin Harris. I like Dustin Harris. I like Darren Zavala his draft year. But my thing here is I don't know if a trade, I guess we'll find out if a trade exists, but like, do you want to trade Shane Bieber or Cal Quantrill and get a minor leaguer back, or do you want to get somebody back who can step in this year in the outfield? Like, because I guess it depends on what the offers are available. Because my preference is to get somebody in the majors back, even though I do like some of these Rangers pieces. And
I agree with that. That is my preference as well. I just think it's going to be difficult, like we've talked about. I just think that there is a lot of teams need help. And like I said, if someone's like, well, Texas has 4 outfielders, I messaged Bryce from Locked On Rangers. So instead they'll flip 32-year-old Mitch Garver, who's currently DHing, and let those 4 guys rotate.
Right.
They don't really. And Dustin Harris is really interesting and fun, but I agree. You're trying to find a situation where you can trade for an outfielder, how many teams are trying to trade for an outfielder? A lot. I think it's, and everyone's like, trade for power. Here's the biggest problem for this team right now when it comes to trading for power. What is your golden trade ticket? Like, again, Shane Bieber is
the guy who's been hurt the last 2 out of the last 3 years.
3 years and was not good. He was a average pitcher before his injury, if not below average.
He's a number 3. He's a number 3.
He was
which
a number
is fine.
3 at best. He wasn't even necessarily always. He looked sometimes like more of a 4, and he wasn't missing enough bats. He was not able to go more than 2 times through the lineup. I mean, Aaron Savale 100% had more trade value than Bieber, and it wasn't even close. And I really like Kyle Manzardo, but Manzardo was a dinged prospect at the time as well. So I don't think there is a ton of value in Bieber, especially because he cost $12 million. And, I mentioned this to you, but again, off air, his value in terms of a draft pick varies greatly dependent on the team who acquires him. Because if the Dodgers, let's say if Dodgers acquire him and they're over the luxury tax again, guess what? All they're getting is a 4th rounder when he leaves, and that's not really much value. So, yeah,
he would have to go to a team that's not in the luxury tax penalty to really feel the value of giving him the qualifying offer, for sure. I mean, I disagree. Okay, at the time, it's easy to say Savali had more trade value because he was healthy and Bieber was not.
But he also had the more years of control.
He did, but if you would have told me at the time, if Shane Bieber's healthy and Aaron Savali's healthy, I still think Shane Bieber's more valuable for 1.5 playoff runs, because he's just a better pitcher. But like you said, he wasn't pitching all that great when he was healthy.
At the time of that trade, I 100%.
I think we also
Savali had more.
I think we also, because he was hurt, he was healthy, and Bieber was not. That's obvious. But I'm saying if Bieber was healthy, and if we assume his health, we assume he's probably pitching through some injuries. I think it's pretty obvious at this point. He was pitching through some health issues, and he shouldn't have been. That's another story for another day to revisit. But let's assume health. Let's assume he's pitching like the pitcher from 2022. He's 100% a better pitcher than Aaron Savali. He's more valuable despite the years of control. But right now, there's easily a world where Shane Bieber and Cal Quantrill have equal trade value because of the years of control and because of the injury history. So I agree. There's definitely some volatility in Shane Bieber's trade value. So if you're going to trade him or even Cal, if they're on the same plane, you have to expect a level of return back that is equal to those two. Like, there's no Francisco Lindor deal to be had here. You're probably looking at a one player. And the funny thing with Power is this, before we move on to more of this and some additional thoughts on the Stephen Vogt interview stuff. But the funny thing about Power is, remember the year Chris Carter led the league in homers?
And he got DFA'd.
Yeah, he got DFA'd. Like, the guy hit like 40 home runs, and the Brewers were like, we don't need him. We're not going to pay him this money next year. Because at the time you had the ball was a little bit juiced. Everybody was obsessed with launch angle, and launch angle does matter. But like, everybody felt like, you could bring in a 30 home run hitter who has like a 110 WRC plus, like an Adolis Garcia originally. But guess what? Those guys are going further and further away now. Like, the power is becoming more scarce, and it's more valuable because we're seeing more than half the runs in the playoffs are scored by home runs. And it's not the end all be all, but you have to finish somewhere in the top half in power numbers to really have a successful season. And that's what teams are realizing. That's why power is becoming, once again, more coveted and harder to deal. Like, you can't expect Shane Bieber to get you 30 home runs back. All right. More on that and some additional Stephen Vogt thoughts in just a moment. When the World Series does get here, I would definitely be willing to put some more money on Adolis Garcia. Maybe Evan Carter. Let's see. That Rangers lineup is really good. We talk about playoff lineups, man. That is there are no breaks in that lineup. I know some guys have had up and down postseasons, but make your postseason debut with FanDuel during the World Series, America's #1 sportsbook. Join FanDuel today to get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. And visit FanDuel.com/lockdown to create your new account. get on the action on the first pitch on Friday until the final out and bet on everything from strikeouts to who will win the game. We have no idea who's pitching game one for whoever pitches there. I think Zach Wheeler is about to pitch for the Phillies, which is wild. But if you don't want to wait the whole game to get a win in any of your bets, predict what will happen the next at bat with quick bets, bet on Adolis Garcia home run in one of his World Series at bats, win money from that. Head over to FanDuel.com/lockedon right now. Step up to the plate with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed and make every moment more with FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. And watch the action on your, listen to the action on your Sirius XM app on Friday. Just search for the teams or search World Series.
I do have to quickly say this before people comment. So I have to point out Arizona was a bottom 10 team in home runs this year. And they're about ready to make the World Series.
Right. So are they, is that an anomaly, or are you saying it's possible? Because Cleveland...
It's possible. I mean, last year we've seen teams get there. Like, does it help? Absolutely, because it's a smaller sample size. But if it was, I would be curious to know, because Sarah Langs always has these good stats.
Mm-hmm. I would be curious to know what percentage of runs Arizona has scored this postseason via the home run, because the average is about 50-50. So I'm willing to
tonight was 0 so far.
Right. But as look how they knocked the Brewers out. They hit home runs and knocked the Brewers out. Like, I'd be willing to bet they are close to the postseason average in terms of runs scored via the home run. Like, it's about 51%. It's slightly in favor of homers that more runs are scored on. I would be willing to bet that I'd have to look, but I'd be willing to bet that Arizona is very close to that figure, if not right there. So they're hitting timely homers, which is good. I mean, they still hit. Okay, even you're saying that they're in the bottom 10. They're in the bottom 10. They still hit 44 more home runs than Cleveland.
Yeah, I mean, Cleveland is something different, but
nobody below them made the playoffs. The next closest team that made the postseason was Baltimore at 183, and they finished at 17.
But I'll say right now, like the plus minus differential is no. I mean, they have done almost this series. Almost none of their runs have come. They're at a +8 in terms of runs scored against home runs scored. So they have actually, this whole series, it's all been manufactured. Arizona has been the anti-long ball team, which is funny. So they're at a +7 for this series in terms of the runs scored.
Runs, not this series. Okay.
So yeah, just
I have to go back and look at the dot. They hit a lot of home runs against the Dodgers too. I know they
had the one big game. I mean, I'll see. You can talk Stephen Vogt, and I'll give the final number. I'll be able to tally this in like 2 minutes.
I think Fan and Gurriel hit home runs in Game 6 to shake Nola early on. So those home runs were pretty impactful. They still matter. There are still some comments going on about Vogt the other day. People were saying, "Well, we want someone with experience." I don't know how much experience matters. Like, how many managers around the league had experience before this? Like, we're seeing a trend now where, like, I know no one's going to say that Aaron Boone's a good manager, because I don't think I wanted Aaron Boone to become Cleveland's manager. But like, Kevin Cash wasn't a manager before he went to Tampa Bay. He was the Indians bullpen coach. Who was the Braves manager now that everyone likes?
Snitker.
Snitker. Career minor leaguer. He was basically the Braves' Mike Sarbaugh.
But he at least had that experience in the minor leagues as a coach.
Yeah, that's fine. Craig Counsell came in with no managerial experience. Didn't manage anywhere before that. Matt Guittaro for the Royals was not a manager.
But they all had much more experience around coaching.
That's fine. There's been a lot of examples of guys over the years that jumped into coaching and managing.
+3, so they are +3 for the postseason in runs scored versus home run scored. So they are.
So like I said, it's about even. So when they're hitting home runs,
they're probably about 60-40 in the overall percentage.
Yeah, Rocco Baldelli, the Twins. I mean, I really love Rocco Baldelli. He was not a long time coach either. He was coaching and doing some different stuff. I don't think this experience matters, because, like you said yesterday, it's a holistic approach. You are looking to find a guy who does stuff behind the scenes very well. And like we talked about yesterday too, is the in-game moments we notice more because we're watching them, and sometimes players don't perform. But there are plenty of examples where, like we said before, managers probably get too much credit when things are good, and they get too much blame when things are bad. And it's a whole staff approach. Like you talked about with hitting coaches helping with Adolis Garcia. You've got to have the right people in place to do multiple jobs. You got to have the right players in place. And I don't care how much experience the guy has. I want to know how he is preparing his players to play. How does he have his staff assembled to connect with his players, get them ready to play? There's so much that goes into this. I don't think that.
Yeah, I just think it's really hard. And exactly for all the reasons you're saying, it's hard to take a guy who has been a special assistant for 1 year and throw them into it. I know it's a holistic approach. We've all had jobs, and it's nothing to the degree of this job.
Okay, but
throwing someone in after 1 year of experience, it's not like you can really. Yes, I know you're around the game, but that doesn't. We've seen a lot of also awful, terrible, worst managers in baseball who this was the approach with. You can have another catcher like Mike Matheny. Now, I'm okay with Vogt. We'll see how it goes if they hire him. But we've also seen this spectacularly explode in negative ways. We've seen a lot of guys completely fall flat on their face, and it's a risk. It is a massive risk.
There's no guarantees in any of this for sure. You could easily use a retread like anybody and act like it's going to work, and it may not. I mean, Buck Showalter is going to go to the Angels. And whatever happens over there, I'm probably not going to blame Buck Showalter because they're a crap show of a franchise. So a right manager doesn't always mean good or bad things necessarily, because there's a lot more that goes into it. But if you think the Guardians are going to hire someone who is going to make a decision on how to put his lineup together, or who to bring in the 8th inning and how long to leave that pitcher in without consulting the rest of his coaching staff, or without consulting other people on the team, or considering a lot of factors that work here, it is not a tyrant dictator approach. The Guardians
it isn't, but we have to run. So I want to thank everyone for rating and reviewing. We'll continue this conversation tomorrow. Thank you all for joining us, and go Guardians.